The microbiome is your second genome, or it's the completion of your genome that is allowing you to live in this world. It adapts. I love the thought that the microbiome is adapting and adapts to your environment and adapts to where you're living or what you're eating or how you're feeling to try and help you. Your own genome can't do that, but the second genome can do that.
Forestil dig en usynlig verden, der bor i dig. I din tarm, på din hud, i din mund. En verden af milliarder af mikroorganismer, bakterier, svampe og vira, der former dit liv hver eneste dag. De påvirker dit helbred, dit humør og din generelle trivsel. Velkommen til Microbiome, podcasten, der dykker dybt i mikrobernes forunderlige verden og forsøger at forstå, hvorfor det er vigtigt, at vi passer godt på dem.
Hello everyone and welcome to the podcast. My name is Johan Hartmann and I am a co-founder of microbiome company Unseen Bio. Today we are doing our first episode speaking English, so I beg you all and to forgive me. It's not my native tongue, and the reason we are doing it in English is because we have a distinguished guest with us today. It is Adam Baker, head of Future Labs and director of science within Novonesis. Hi, Adam.
Hi, good morning, Johan.
We are very happy to have you here, as you are a long-term friend of Unseen Bio, and we are close collaborators. And we have invited you today because you work within Novonesis, and you have a lot of knowledge of the industry angle on the microbiome, and that is what we are going to talk about today. So, Adam, can you start out introducing yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Baker, and I'm currently leading what's called the Future Labs in Novonesis. I'm a scientist by training, and I've been into technology all of my life. And I've been living in Denmark for the last 12 years.
So you actually speak Danish. So we could potentially do it, but with respect to your native tongue, we do it in English. But Adam, can you maybe elaborate a bit more on your education?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's only recently that I've been interested or studying the microbiome. I've always been interested in biology, and I got my education really around the technology of molecular biology. It fascinated me. When I found out about genetics, when I found out about DNA, something sort of lit up in me. And I was very lucky. I was able to go to university and study that. My first degree was actually in plant biology. And then I was able to move into a new field at the time, gene therapy, and do my PhD. And then since then, I've been very lucky to sort of take jobs around the world where I can do different parts of researching, using the genome and trying to understand how that affects health. Actually, mainly I've been studying not health, but disease. So I've been understanding cancer and cancer treatments and how we could actually use personalized medication so that you could actually do better treatment of people with disease. And then finally, coming to the microbiome.
Yeah, because when you say gene, that's the human genome you started out working with, right?
Yeah.
So when did you catch the interest of the microbiome?
I caught the interest of the microbiome from the human genome. I was studying and working with American hospitals, and we were learning about the onset of cancer in the intestinal system and how bacteria were involved in that and how some bacteria seem to protect from that. And so that's where I started to get intrigued by there's more to this than just the human genome. And I was very lucky at that time that I got offered a job in Christian Hansen to try and understand better how these bacteria that they were selling called probiotics worked. And that's where we started doing a lot more research. And I found the interest in the microbiome. And really, we'll probably get into that later, but the microbiome is You could call it your second genome, and I'm spending a lot of time trying to educate people. It is part of your genome.
So you can say that the academic discovery from your side of the microbiome actually made your interest, it surpassed the one of the human genome, or at least the interaction between the two.
Yeah. I love technology as well. And I think the science of the microbiome, like the science of the human genome, is driven by technology and our learnings in science. So we discussed that actually only because of next generation sequencing and the power of it were we able to start to understand the power and what the microbiome is doing within you. So this is where it's a field of science where technology is allowing us to learn from it. That's a super important point, that it's high-tech technology is allowing us to understand in much more detail what we are and what's within us and how this works and how it makes us healthier.
Was it always written in the stars that you would go the corporate way? Or did you also, you did a PhD, was that in a company or did you do it in a pure academic setting?
I was very, very lucky that I wasn't going to do a PhD. My ambition, believe it or not, was to work for an airline company and travel and understand how that worked. But I was offered a position in a institute that was entirely funded by industry. So I'm super grateful for that chance. That is my point in my life that took me in the direction. It was an institute that had fantastic scientists in it. It was in Vienna, the Institute for Molecular Pathology, but it was funded entirely by Boehringer Ingelheim and Roche. And so as a young student, you were learning about how to do great science, but also how that science was going to be implemented in industry. So I was learning about gene therapy, but looking and working with patients and how we could make a pharmaceutical product. Academic research is brilliant and is needed, but I love the fact that you could see a result of the research you were potentially doing, that you could actually make a difference, maybe sometimes actually see patients receiving the results of the research that was happening.
Adam, I'm going to dive more into now the probiotics field. So Novonesis, and please correct me, Novonesis is a recent result of a merger between Novozymes and Christian Hansen, two Danish industry biosolution giants, and also on the global stage. You come from the Christian Hansen side. They do a lot of different products, but the field that is at least closest related to what we are doing is the biotics field. In short, we have probiotics, we have, that is live bacteria, you have prebiotics, the food of the bacteria. We have symbiotics that can be a mix of different biotics, and we have postbiotics, which is the dead bacteria. Am I correct?
That was very good. That was perfect. I think the postbiotics can also be the products from the bacteria, so metabolites or some of the molecules they produce, things that they produce, but also the dead bacteria.
Can you elaborate a bit on what is the flagships of these ingredients from Novonesis, and what is it that they do in general?
Well, that's a big question.
I know.
So you said it exactly right. It's the world, or it's the universe of the biotics, and that is really the universe of the microbiome. What's happening? Think of this as ecosystems. So we very much like to try and focus things down to single entities. That's why we have different names: the prebiotics and the probiotics and the postbiotics. But I really would like us to start thinking about it as the ecosystems working together. But Christian Hansen has been and was a leader in probiotics. And we had some strains within our portfolio that have been studied for literally decades, 30 or 40 years, and have been demonstrated in clinical trials within the lab to actually have many effects within the human body, either by the metabolites they produce, the hairs, the pili that are actually on the bacteria, how they interact with the other bacteria within your microbiome, how they interact with the mucus in your intestine. These were really the pioneers of microbiome science. We didn't really know how they were working. We didn't have the technology to study them. 40 years ago, we couldn't sequence them to understand what they actually were at the level we can today. And when we did clinical trials, we had to have very obvious outputs to actually see that they were working. And this is where you have the world of probiotics often being linked to things like diarrhea and constipation. Then slowly through the years, we started to study and understand the immune effects, because you could start to see, you were reading immune markers, looking at blood tests and seeing how many virus infections you were getting through a virus season. And that's what we've had. We've had these flagship strains. What we're doing now is applying more and more science so people can really realize the power of these strains. And we're realizing the power of all of the ingredients. It's not just single strains, it's mixtures, symbiotics, where you're taking prebiotics and several probiotics and postbiotics as well, putting these things together. Because again, think about it, it's not a single bullet that you're trying to achieve here. You're trying to move and nudge an ecosystem, a complex ecosystem that's within you. And we're learning about it, but it's really just the start. It's just the start of the era of the microbiome.
You, I guess as a company, you realized that you were able to produce these strains. They came from something, and also the importance of it and the potential to be a product that you could sell alone. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not stated enough, and it's something that I've learned and come to appreciate a lot. I worked at first in the diagnostics and the pharmaceutical industry, and I learned a lot about small molecules and how you make pharmaceutical products very, very carefully. You have to do exactly the same, and it's even more difficult sometimes when you're working with live organisms. And you're working with live bacterial organisms. Bacteria are incredibly successful organisms, and they live everywhere, and it's very, very difficult to get them under control. So the fact that we're producing them the same every time in these huge fermentation tanks and producing them safely, where they're not contaminated with other bacteria that would also like to live at the same time, and with the same quality time after time, is actually a huge, huge challenge. And when I go out and talk scientifically, that's one of the things I'm explaining, that it is incredibly difficult to do this, that each batch, each time you do this, they come out with the same quality, the same efficacy. They're so robust that they can be alive on the shelves in the pharmacies or in the supermarkets for 2 years, anywhere around the world. This is a massive, massive effort. And so that's been hugely important to understand. And then realizing that these products are working. You don't produce these millions of doses a year and give them to people. People would not come back and spend money buying them again and again if they were not feeling the effects and something was not happening. So it's up to us now to try and educate even more about this, about what's important to make a high quality product that's safe and that actually works. And that's what we're trying to do at the moment.
Adam, can you specify for me, why is it important to supplement your, let's say, healthy diet with specific bacteria as a supplement?
If you have a healthy diet and you're healthy, do you need supplementation? It's a question we often get. I would say supplementation is never harmful. Having a diverse diet, really trying to eat different things, is very, very important. But probiotics, or some of the products that we're selling, the probiotic strains, are there. They could maybe give you resilience. They're there as an insurance policy. They make sure that things are tip-top in some respects. So do you need to take them all the time? I would say sometimes maybe not, but it is a good good thing to be having. Maybe certain times of year, as the flu season is coming, you really could be taking one of the probiotic strains that you know is boosting the immune system. Generally, strains which give you resilience in your digestive system have been demonstrated to stop traveler's diarrhea and these things. These are great things to be having most of the time because they will actually bring resilience into the system. They'll be there, they'll be doing their job, they'll be sort of fertilizing the other strains and just making sure that your microbiome is functioning tip-top in some respects like that. So I would say that it is not essential, but it's a good idea. And yes, I do take probiotics every day.
Adam, can you tell a bit more about how do you at Novonesis work with the microbiome? How do you push science forward in this field?
Yeah. So Novonesis, which is the new combined company, we do have a mission of biosolutions. In the human health, it's biosolutions for health. And we have a very, very big menu, ingredient list that we can use now. And the goal is that we want to educate on the microbiome. We want to educate people about health. We want to educate people about eating healthy foods, how supplements can help. Again, about what is important in the microbiome, taking less medications and really taking natural solutions, which is what we've got. And you can think about it from many angles. We have the direct supplements that we're producing in human health biosolutions. We also have functional foods, healthy foods, dairy foods, non-dairy foods, where we're using natural ingredients. We have agricultural products so that you're not needing to use pesticides. So we're working in many different angles, but all of this is to help with people really and health, also society, and the environment and health, all of that together. So in the human health biosolutions, we're really trying to use these ingredients, as we call them, these biosolutions, and help people remain healthy or become healthier. We're targeting from infants all through life stages, and really we're trying to make up a whole menu of products. So because there's different times and different phases in life, there's men and there's women, that we could actually use different types of ingredients to actually help with our health. And that's what we're working with.
It's a misunderstanding that I often meet, that there is no ideal single strain bacteria or probiotic that you can eat. There is a lot of different strains, and there's a lot that's on the market, but there's also a lot that's not discovered yet. So the ones that are available from Novonesis and from other companies, those are the ones that we are able to produce and that exists at the moment to our current knowledge level. But there potentially be a lot more out there. So just for our users to understand that it's not a single solution that we are looking for. We are looking for a broad spectrum of individualized solutions, probably. Isn't that correct, Adam?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, I agree. I'm always cautious with this because we actually talk, and when we educate ourselves, we think about the microbiome, and we talk about all of us are different, and we all have our unique microbiome, which is true, and we all have different strains within us. Then that would be challenging if we're thinking everyone needs a different probiotic or a different set of strains to make their microbiome better. We have learned that we have an incredible diversity within us of strains. But what we're learning now is that diversity of strains also has a functionality, what they do, what they output, their output. And that is a little less diverse. You have many different strains, but you have a basic set of outputs of the microbiome, producing the right type of molecules responding in these ways. But yeah, there is not one probiotic that you take and you fix the problem. You can take one or individual sets of probiotics and nudge the ecosystem. The other question is, what about all of these other strains which you're talking about, which are these exotic strains which we now know from deep sequencing that live deep within you, Some people call them the unculturable strains, the next generation probiotics. They are very important, and we're learning about some of them. Akkermansia has just received a health claim. It's one of the first to come to the market, and it's very, very interesting. The challenge with those strains is that you have to take them as medications because of the regulatory environment. They have not been studied, and they've not been used safely in humans for the same length of time as many of what we call probiotics, bifidobacteria, lactobacillus. They have a different regulatory pathway because people have been digesting them for centuries, and there's been no adverse side effects. Basically, they're safe. So they're called presumed safe. We don't know that for some of the new strains, and they produce a lot of different molecules. They're very interesting, but we have to take them singly down the drug pathway because of the regulatory environment, that they have to be checked to be safe. So you have to treat them as if you're developing a new drug. And that's happening, and there's lots of companies doing that at the moment, and it's very exciting. But I still think there's a massive role for some of the bifidobacteria, the lactobacillus. Sometimes people forget about them. They are part of your microbiome. And they have very important roles in nudging, cross-feeding other parts of the microbiome.
You have done a lot of studies, Novonesis and other companies done a lot of studies on their strains, a lot of clinical trials, proved safety, and also proven effect. But depending on where in the world you sell them, there are different regulatory claims. So, for example, if you buy a bottle that contains Novonesis strains here in Denmark or Europe, you are not allowed to read about that. It doesn't say anything about how it works. And it's different in different part of the world. Isn't that a massive challenge?
It is a massive challenge. In Europe, we have very, very strict regulations on food supplements, dietary supplements, and what you can say to try and protect the consumers. I do understand the principle that you can't just claim anything with anything. Unfortunately, I think that we have come to realize through science that food supplements, what you take, the microbiome, is part of your health regime and is involved in health and is involved in prevention of disease or disease progression. And the regulations are challenged because really we can't go there and talk about those aspects at the moment. In food supplements, we can talk about health, and we've got very strict regulations on what we can say in terms of claims, particularly in Europe. You can apply through EFSA, through the European Food Supplement Administration. You can apply for a health claim, an official health claim, but that has not been successful yet for anybody. And that's maybe because the science that is needed is very, very difficult to attain. Maybe we're getting there now, that we can demonstrate scientifically really how these supplements are having their effects. So maybe in the future there will be the possibility, but we're already selling food supplements for billions of euros in Europe. And unfortunately, the consumers are not able to get information about what are good quality and what is the science and what is not. We work in an industry where it's very difficult to show all of the science and all of the safety that we've done, and we're not able to communicate that well enough at the moment to the consumers, and that's a shame. And we're working very, very hard that needs to change, and that's one of the missions at Novonesis, is to, in a positive way, challenge the regulatory environment about how and what can we say about dietary supplements and about human biosolutions to help people understand. If we are allowed to do some more, it will help, and it will help. The industry does have a lot of, we call them snake oils and copycats.
Exactly.
And I think that is very important, that the more information we could give out, the better we could help consumers understand what is a true product and what is actually something which is just copying or hoping or using the word, as we all like to use the word, probiotics. And I think, for me, I work with probiotics, but I'm frustrated by the name because it is so misused so often.
You kind of touched on the last challenge, that you also see scientists scientists being very skeptical. Some scientists being very skeptical on probiotics. For example, if you have a broad spectrum antibiotics that cleans out or damage your microbiome, then they say, hey, you shouldn't take probiotics because it fill up your gut with not your own. Your own microbiome is not allowed to rebound, but you fill it up with these industrial biotics that's not meant to be there. Mm-hmm. How would you answer that skepticism?
Well, that's a very good question. I like to put it down to a sort of naivety of the science, I think. Again, we're being reductionist about how we imagine these things working and what's happening. When you take a probiotic supplement, 1 billion bacterial dose, if it's a Novonesis product often, that is a drop in the ocean compared to what's inside you already. It has the opportunity to catalyze other events. It has the opportunity to work with your immune system, but it is not going to swamp and fill up. So again, we and I understand that as humans, we sometimes use fantasy a little bit to imagine what's happening. We are starting to see through big studies, through longitudinal studies, what effects things like antibiotics is happening. Antibiotics does not wipe out your microbiome. It definitely disrupts it to a large extent, but it rebounds. But then if you repeat that and keep doing that, we're seeing a loss of that plasticity of the microbiome, and you're seeing that things start to fall apart maybe. And we're seeing the consequences of that in health. That's why one of the things we're seeing of this increase in autoimmune diseases, it's being linked very heavily to the overuse of antibiotics. We're still learning about the microbiome. We're learning about how far-reaching it is. So when someone says, yeah, you take antibiotics and then you fill them up with industrialized strains, one thing is it's good if it's an industrialized Novonesis strain that's been demonstrated to contain no antibiotic resistance genes and no other else and been proven to be very safe. It wouldn't fill you up. It will help the process of restoration, or it will stimulate certain factors in the body. So I think we just need to assume that we don't know. It's the same thing that 5 years ago you would never discuss with people the use of antibiotics for stress and anxiety, the links of the microbiome to Parkinson's disease, to these types of very, very important things. Now this is all becoming much clearer, and we're understanding more and more of the pathways, how molecules are communicating between gut and brain, what is happening, disease trajectories. This is all coming. So again, it's about knowledge. It's about science, and it's about knowledge. It's about research. The more we can do that, the less skeptics we will have.
So what I'm hearing you say, such a skepticism is as much as a hypothesis as the benefit is. So they kind of stand in front of each other. You could argue for both, and it's something that we will learn along the way. Final topic, Adam. The future. What is the latest research or the latest research trend in this field where you see the biggest potential, and where do you see the future for the biotic space? That was two questions.
That was two questions. They're big questions. I see the biotic space just really, really expanding. I think the future is massive. We're realizing the importance of the microbiome and how to look after it. I see the future very much being in disease prevention, that we're realizing the importance of the microbiome. We're realizing how important biotics are in our life. And I see that the more information we get, more microbiome sequencing, wearables, digital data, that's where I see the future. We're starting to get the indications and information that will help us make better decisions, and we'll actually try and improve our health through, I don't want to say manipulation, but maybe support of the microbiome. We're realizing we fundamentally have to respect more and work more with our microbiome from birth onwards. And you'll start to see that happening. And the better we do that, the better off we're going to be. I see very, very much, one area that's incredibly understudied is just female health. And I think the world of biotics and the microbiome is going to be fundamental there. How we can work through with fertility and with menopause and these areas, I think has got a massive role for the microbiome. So there's specific products we were thinking of or pushing into these areas. This is a great area of need. Infants have a whole different set of needs, and I think there's key areas to focus on there. And the understanding, and that's where Unseen Bio comes in, the understanding actually looking at your microbiome takes you on a different trajectory and path straight away. And this is something I would love to see more and more commonly. Just like we all have watches and phones that tells us how many steps we're doing, is reporting to us our health every morning and starting doing. Seeing your microbiome data is also a way to be more enlightened and start to realize the importance of your microbiome and how that links to your health generally.
Thank you for elaborating on that. Adam, I have you need to provide our users with one final thing. When someone is going to pick a probiotic, can you give some advice? And I'm going to remove your first line of success by saying selecting a Novonesis.
Well, of course I'm going to say that.
Product. But what is the end consumer? Mm-hmm. What are they going to look for? Because it is currently a very, very complex and confusing task for a non-scientist, and even for scientists and knowledgeable people to select a consumerized probiotic from the shelf. What would your advice be?
Well, one thing is, do you buy from the shelf these days? Because you're actually buying a lot more online. And online, you can actually get more information. You can be more of a detective yourself. You can actually, because the companies can give more information online as well. And you can start to get a bit of reinsurance from what you're seeing. If you're buying in a shop, I fully agree with you. Because of the regulations, it's very difficult to see. I would recommend that you go, if you can, with the brands that you know and understand and trust. But look on the product. Look and see if you can see a scientific name and a description, and that they say how long they will be alive, these products. It's really down to the simple points like that. How long will they survive, and how much of a guarantee do you get? And I know that sounds difficult, but it is. It's like if you're in the supermarket looking at products, you do look at the ingredients, you look at the expiry date, you consider, and it's the same thing if you're in a pharmacy.
Thank you, Adam. I think that was a good final advice. Thank you very much, Adam Baker, Head of Future Labs, Novonesis, and Director of Science.
Thank you, Johan. It's been great to be here.
Du har lyttet til Mikrobiomet, en podcast fra Unseen Bio. Din vært er Johan Hartmann, og Linda Nygaard producerer. Hvis du er blevet mere nysgerrig på tarmsundhed generelt, så gå ind og følg Unseen Bio på Instagram, Facebook eller LinkedIn. Her poster vi hele tiden gode råd og ny viden om mikrobiomsundhed. Hvis du kan lide, hvad du hører, så del den endelig med folk, du kender. Tryk abonner i dit podcast feed, eller giv os en anmeldelse på iTunes. Vi lyttes ved.